The art of backpacking is knowing what not to bring.
Sure.
So it's about, is that you don't actually know the answer. Like you literally, like you do not know the answer.
Yeah.
You know who knows the answer? Your customers. They know the answer. To make sure that one, again, you're choosing the right type of capital, the right time to get that capital within the growth of your business, and then a partner whose mandate aligns with yours, who's going to fund you at that certain time. Basically, when you feel like you want to start this business, the first place you're going to go is, we call it, in the industry, they call it friends, families, and fools, which is not very nice, is you have to get out of the building. You have to get out of the building because you can build something, and this is the fatal flaw for a lot of engineers. And this is I'm speaking from a non-engineer, but this is what I've heard a lot about. Is that, and it's actually, it's not even engineers, it's everybody. You build something, and we've fallen victim to it too. You build something that you think that people want, and they don't actually want it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the High Level Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am without co-host this week. He unfortunately has to work and earn money he said he has a bond to pay or something like that. I said it was crap, but he said he can't be here. But I do have a very special guest on today. Thank you guys for joining. Guys, if this is your first time joining, this is the High Level Podcast. We do all things engineering, science, physics, whatever you want to know. We're bringing you up to date and trying to make the world a better place, specifically in South Africa. Guys, as I said, this week I have an awesome guest on. Been following her quite a bit and their company on Instagram, LinkedIn. I will put all those links in the show notes as well. But just to give you guys an idea of what we are dealing with this week, today we have Abby Stern on the podcast. She's the Climate Culture Officer at Holocene, a venture capital firm specializing in funding and building African climate tech startups. She has international exposure to a variety of industries, from retail to FMCG to agri-food-tech, which apparently is a sector, which I did not know about, but it is a sector. She graduated from Northwestern University in the US in 2009 with a Bachelor in Political Science and received her MBA from Stanford University a few years later. She has worked at multiple business levels, all the way down from volunteer up to the VP level, and now she is the co-founder and C-suite exec at Holocene. Her experience includes a few things. We'll get through this. There's lots of big numbers here, so be calm with me, guys. Former VP of sales for one of the world's leading food tech companies, leading an 11-person global team responsible for $34 million in annual revenue. Managed a $750 million portfolio for a top Fortune 50 retail company. I don't know how many people have that on their survey. Maybe you can add that as well, Abby. I don't know if that's on there or not. So we've got office mover.
Just below office design.
Just below office mover. All right. She created company-wide health, sustainability, and social impact programs for 2 multinational corporations, impacting operations across 4 continents with over 80,000 employees. She's built a social impact food incubation program, which grew and scaled 30 diverse South African food businesses, contributing to local job creation, excuse my English, and significant revenue growth. She's consulted for 6 prominent South African food brands, agriculture and retail brands as well, developing and operationalizing product development, sales, go-to-market, and investment strategies. And as I said earlier, she received her master's in business administration, her MBA from Stanford Graduate School in 2015. These days, Abby spends her time supporting Holocene's portfolio of companies to build strong teams and navigate their challenges as they grow. She does this while actively building creative solutions-orientated climate community of entrepreneurs, investors, and climate enthusiasts. When she's not working, you can find her running and hiking Stellenbosch's mountain trails. Wouldn't we all like that? Holding thumbs for that. Eating a giant salad or enjoying the beauty of the Western Cape with her 2 kids and her husband, who is also her co-founder. Abby, thank you so much for being on. It's a real honor. Thank you for joining me on my tiny little podcast. I really appreciate it. Would you like to add anything to that? Are you happy with where that went?
I would take away some things. No, just
I was thinking...
No, it was great. It made me feel really good. And maybe it was like a nice little rundown memory lane. But I apologize if it was my fault that it was so long.
No, not at all. It's great because it shows people that I have important people on the podcast. I'm not the only idiot here. So thank you again for joining us.
It's as important as it is verbose, but that's fine. You have other verbose people on your podcast.
There we go. Fair enough. I think, Abby, just because I harped on it a bit there, AgriFood-Tech, what is that?
Yes, it is a thing. So I think it's good to chat a little about that. It's basically this really interesting sector that's like the whole food value chain, right? So if you look at the food value chain, it isn't just what ends up on your plate. It's all the way from agriculture and how it's produced and the inputs and the land and all that stuff up to a delivery robot potentially that's giving you, a meal that you ordered. Like it's basically that entire value chain, the entire food value chain. So, but it is from so that's the agri-food piece. Then from the technology piece, it is how do you use technology to make an improved food systems. So whether that's, precision agriculture, or if it is meal delivery, or if it is, different software platforms for restaurants, or if it's, new different types of fertilizer that are more eco-friendly, all these different technologies can be used throughout that value chain.
Okay, that's awesome. So in terms of, just because I'm interested, South Africa versus the rest of the world, I don't know how involved you are in the industry in SA, but are we okay? Are we cutting edge? Are we behind? What's your view on that?
It's a good question. And actually, I would like to mention, although that I sound very American, I am very American, but my dad was born in Port Elizabeth.
Okay, very nice. A PE boy, I like it.
Yes, he's a PE boy, but he did leave when he was, I think, 7 years old, came to New York. And so it's cool to actually come back down here and have, where my roots began, to come back. But it is interesting too to see the differences you said between South Africa and so I've obviously spent most of my life in the United States, and then also lived in Europe for a while, East Africa for a while, and then now down here. And so I actually think, in terms of it's really interesting comparing South Africa from an agriculture perspective to East or West Africa, or the rest of the continent, really, because you have much bigger farms here than you see on the rest of the continent, which also, for our business in investing in agri-tech, I think is actually quite interesting, because there are if you have bigger farms, you have more resources and you have more kind of technologies that you could actually deploy. But I think, the produce here is amazing. We obviously export it to a lot of the world. There's a reason for that. I think that the food quality is actually pretty good. I actually am a vegetarian, hence the giant salads that I eat for breakfast.
There we go, yeah. But, I assumed.
Yeah, and I also, maybe this is my life hack, is just eating large amount of roughage.
Fair enough.
But I do think there's opportunity across the world, and I know here as well in terms of factory farming. That's one area that I think is pretty outdated, and it definitely has a purpose in terms of getting a large amount of calories to a population, but it's not great for the environment, it's not great for our health, and it's not great for the animals. And so there are still some opportunities there. I saw that a lot, obviously, in the United States. Factory farming is massive. In parts of Europe, it's less so, which is nice to see. But I think we can all, as a kind of a human society, kind of take a couple steps back from that and really figure out what's the best way to get calories needed to people in a way that makes sure that people have enough food and have enough nutritious food, but doesn't actually do terrible things to our health and sustainability in the environment. So I think overall the food system here is pretty, it's good. It's really interesting. It's not as technologically advanced, but I think as let's say the United States, and I said the same thing about Europe, but I think that's sometimes a good thing, that we're not eating all of these really strange, non-foods that pose to be foods. So sometimes you go down the tech route and you actually go too far, which I don't think we've gotten there here. So that's a good thing.
Okay, cool. While we're on this, do you think that conversation's happening at a high level in terms of sustainable agriculture? I don't know if you have an insight into that. Is it at legislative level yet, or are we still in the beginning stages of going sustainable in agriculture?
Yeah, definitely if we're talking just about South Africa, not as much, but if you're talking about the world, and actually the world makes a big impact, because as we said, we export a lot of the food that a lot of the rest of the world eats. I know my dad, just the other day, he's in DC now, and he's like, oh, I got this amazing South African ruby grapefruit, and I had it in my spar, and I had it, and he got it, and we're like, oh, it's amazing. But so we export a lot. So the legislation that's coming down from other countries like the US, but Europe is the most advanced with this. It impacts us, and so that's actually where we, as Holocene, see a major area that is good from a sustainability side, but it will also be important for business. And when you can find solutions that are, financially impactful for businesses, and then also environmentally impactful, that's where you find a really interesting business model. So in terms of that question, yes, there is legislation coming down. A lot of it is coming from Europe, saying, hey, if we're going to, bring these imports in. So if a country like South Africa is going to export to us, we need to understand their value chain. We need to see where their waste streams go. We need to understand the sustainability of their operations. So that actually forces producers down here to become more sustainable, because if they want to export and they want to continue that business and that revenue stream, then they have to be able to hit those requirements. So that's definitely something that, even if it's not happening locally, the impacts are quite massive when it happens globally.
No, fair. I think I don't know whether it's good or bad. I'll just give my thoughts on this. It's sad to see that as a nation, we are only driven by the policies of other nations. It would be nice if we drove policy here I can see how, because we see it as well, automotive sector as well, pushing EVs, especially Europe, pushes our value chain to change. Like you say, agriculture as well, I can see that coming as well. Things like the chemicals that we export as well. The guys want to see how does the value chain look. So for me, it's sad that it's not driven here, that it's driven, but I guess it's driven either way. So at some point, someone has to change.
Yeah, and I mean, from the energy standpoint, though, I'm really hopeful with some of the things that we've seen in terms of policy from South Africa too. Like that's where we also see another like amazing advantage and a really cool opportunity to invest and to build companies and to really leverage entrepreneurship is like the fact that the grid is opening up, right? So what we're seeing is privatization of the grid, which happens through policy, and the reaction of kind of the challenges that we face from our grid and from our energy system is now being addressed through policy, which is opening up all this opportunity for these independent power producers for more sustainable, renewable, power sources, and all these really interesting companies that we've invested in a number of them this year. And in the last year, so like there is some policy changes happening in South Africa, which is very exciting, and we've seen it a lot on the energy standpoint. But I think, I mean, sometimes it's local and sometimes it's global. But these are the things that drive us. What I'm just thought about is like we're seeing more policy in general that is moving us towards a more sustainable place. Because without it, like we're all not going to. Yeah, exactly.
No. Fair enough. I think it's an interesting one you bring up, energy, because it's something I might give away my age here, but that we've been dreaming about since I've been around is Eskom opening up a bit more to being this completely state-owned enterprise where no one gets into the grid at all. And in the past few years, it's actually been really interesting to watch policy start to open up and private guys getting the opportunity to change the grid. I think that's really awesome. Speaking of, so let's, this was a good segue. We're talking about you guys investing in companies, energy companies, things like that. Can you give us for those who don't know, what is, you guys are obviously a venture capital firm. What is venture? What's its place in the business ecosystem, in the entrepreneur ecosystem? Give us a high level overview of that. How does it work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if I were my partner, I would give you an entire history of venture capital.
We'll have to have him on.
You'll have to, exactly. That'll be your next podcast. So
there we go.
But effectively, to skip over the whaling industry into present day.
Oh goodness, it starts with whales.
Oh yeah. Everything starts with whales. No, it's basically like high risk capital, right? So now I do want to tell the whaling story, but I'll go into it. Okay, so it is like it's basically like you have these things that are being built or being done. And it's incredibly risky, but the return is potentially quite high, right? So it's a high beta, high risk, high return. You could get nothing, or you could get, a 10, 100x, whatever it is, return. So venture capital plays a place in the market where we basically have cash, and we say, okay, like we have a certain sector that we're specialized in. For us, it's climate tech in Africa. And we said, okay, we want to put this cash out to the world to help people who are building businesses that we think are, again, this high potential, but for other people, for banks, for other individuals, feels risky, right? That's basically what venture capital is. It's risk equity. And so what we do is we say, okay, we're going to give you some cash. We want you then to keep building your thing. What we actually do, so what we do that's a little bit different than a lot of venture capital firms, is we actually sit next to our entrepreneurs and we actually work with them. So not only are we giving them some value, and in return, we get equity. So we get a percentage of the ownership of the company, right? And it really depends on how much we give them and how much their company's valued at the time. So we give them cash. We say, okay, you're doing something that hasn't been seen before, hasn't been done before. Banks probably aren't going to lend you any money because it's maybe a little bit more than an idea. For us, we like to see that they've actually made some money already, but you don't have as much of a track record, but we believe in what you're doing and the technology that you're building and believe in you guys as a team. We'll give you some cash. We'll sit next to you. We'll go and help you with a couple different work streams. We're going to give you value and create value for you, and then go make this thing, build the business, make it valuable, and then, hopefully the value of our equity will increase, and then we'll get a return on that investment. So basically, if we're taking that risk, if the company succeeds, which, I mean, VC also is an interesting model, and it started with whaling, but really became popular in Silicon Valley with SaaS, with software as a service. So that was one that was very easy to scale in terms of, if you build this whole software layer and software foundation, then you get a bunch of people to get onto your platform without much incremental extra work, and then you can get a massive return. However, most of the companies will likely not get that massive return. So as a VC, because it is risky, there are going to be a couple companies that end up being, great and end up being 10, 20, maybe 100x your return. But a lot of them are going to either be
Fail.
stable,
Yeah.
SMEs, or they're going to fail. And so that's the risk that we're taking, is that we give you cash and you fail, right? But we try and do as much as we can to make sure that we believe in the technology and the team and the larger macro trends that are going on. And that's kind of what VC is. It's risky capital that ends up hoping for, on average, a decent return so that we can then bring it back into the market and continue to help technologies grow.
Okay, that was better definition than I could give. I'll give you that. So where does venture stand? Let's say on the one end of the spectrum is I get money from my granny to start my business, all the way up to, I don't know what the least risky would be, maybe like a grant from government. Like where does that whole spectrum, where do you go and where? Maybe this is a bit of a big question, but let's say I'm starting a new thing.
I have graphs for this. This is right on. Yes.
This is right on. Okay. Maybe you could talk us through like a general, like from that spectrum, where does venture sit on that, and where might you look elsewhere depending on where you are in your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yes, I don't know. I mean, this is a podcast, so you can't really see, graphs, but I literally have a graph for you on this that we've created. And it is like, basically on your entrepreneurial journey, like let's say, you're building something, you're really excited about it, you want to make a business out of it. I know this is a group of engineers we're talking to, and a lot of engineers end up building something and saying, hey, this could be a really cool business. Let me see if I can, commercialize this. Sometimes not, as you said, like not knowing exactly where to start there, which is totally cool. Like, you're an engineer, not necessarily a business person, maybe you're both. But basically when you feel like you want to start this business, the first place you're going to go is, we call it, in the industry, they call it friends, families, and fools, which is not very nice, No,
I mean, fair enough.
I like to call it friends, families, and really wonderful, generous people who believe in you.
There we go.
Yes. So when you're first kind of testing out your idea and you're at this kind of ideation stage and you don't necessarily, you're coming up with your MVP, right? Your minimum viable product. When you're still in that stage, you want to get friends, family, and wonderful people. And so those people are going to help you to, get your kind of your product, your idea off the ground a little bit. Institutional is mostly not going to be ready for you. So we would not invest in idea. We need to see more traction than that. We need to see somebody actually build something. We need to see customer excitement for it. We need to see some potential in the market. We actually need to see you kind of muck around for basically like 3 to 5 years before we're able to invest. But that's what people in your network should be able to do, and angel investors potentially too, but mostly friends and family. Then you get into, once you get that minimum viable product on the market and you're actually getting some traction and you're starting to either see the potential for revenue, or you have some revenue, you've been able to identify some customers, that's when you can get some more angel investors involved. So these are other individuals that probably you may not even know, but they're interested in your industry or they're interested in your technology. Maybe they've been an entrepreneur in the past. They've had an exit in terms of like they sold their company. They're looking to reinvest in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So that's where you can get some investment there, and that's where a really early stage venture capital firm will look at you like us. Like, so if you've actually gotten to that post-revenue stage, depending on what type of company is, that's when we'll take a look at you and say, okay, like, look at your tech, look at your team, look at your traction, look at where we see the market going, and potentially invest. Then it's actually interesting because then in this next part, you actually do want to look at, and sometimes a little bit earlier as well, grants are really important. So grants actually are fairly risky in a way, which is great because they kind of help you on the R&D side and help you on the research side. They're basically like money. Sometimes it's a repayable grant, sometimes you have to pay it back, but you don't have to pay a premium on it. And sometimes you just get the grant and that's it. Like, you don't actually have to pay it back, which is fantastic. So entrepreneurs should leverage that as early as they can within their kind of product development cycle. So they can leverage that a little bit. They can leverage that earlier than VCs for sure. They can leverage it at the same time as VCs. The thing is that once you take venture capital and once you give somebody equity in your company, you've lost some ownership. Grants, they'll not take ownership from you. They just give you cash, which is fantastic. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that you don't want to always just get somebody who's going to, like an equity investor. For some parts of your business, you want to get grants, but grants are not guaranteed. They're also not a consistent cash flow. But if you can get one, fantastic, or a couple. And then VC will help you with that kind of like early stage and even into Series A and B and C. But then the other piece, once you start to have something like hardware, you don't want to finance everything with equity because it's expensive in terms of like the percentage that you end up paying back, right? So debt is another area you look at, and that's with banks. But you do have to have a lot more traction in order to work with banks. You have to have products. You have to have collateral. Like, you actually have to have something sitting in your warehouse. Like, let's say like one of our companies is does charging stations. So they need to actually have those chargers and say, hey, I'm going to borrow against these chargers. Here's an asset. Here's a thing that I have that if all goes to bust, you're going to be able to take these chargers. You're going to get some of this value. Yeah. So what we talk about a lot is blended finance and blended capital, and that is really understanding based off of where you're at with your business and what type of business you're running. How can you use grants to help you with research and development? How can you use equity to help you with high growth things like hiring and scaling your tech stack and all those different things? And then how can you also then leverage debt to help you on the hardware side and to fund that? Because you have to look at how much all these different funders are going to cost you in a way, and then that helps you to have not everything leveraged to equity, which ends up being more expensive. So we can get into weighted average cost of capital, but we don't have to do that now. But that is kind of where we sit. And then VC, as I said, goes all the way up to Series A, B, C, D, E. I don't know how far you want to go. Hopefully you're profitable by the time you get to B and C.
Yeah, fair. That would help.
Yeah, that would really help. Yeah. And then, grants you can continue to do, but usually it's more in the R&D stage, and then debt can come in a little bit more the later you get and the more traction that you have and the more kind of you build up your business. And then really what you want to look at after that is acquisitions. Like, can a company then buy your company, right? Or can you have a partnership with them? Or, that's when you're looking to actually kind of get out or be absorbed, or maybe you're going to, make it big and turn into a corporation. Like, that's cool. But mostly we're looking for exits at the later stages.
Sense. Yeah. Okay, no, fair enough. So if I hear you right, Abby, so we go from, let's say, idea, we finance with a few fools who are stupid enough to give us their money, right?
Or generous and
they're generous enough. Yes, there we go.
Exactly.
The donations. At that point, we're looking. Maybe there's a research grant that's specifically in our scope, and that would be really helpful for just getting things off the ground. At some point, maybe we don't even start selling product, but we can show a venture firm, these are the customers who are interested, they're excited about the brand, whatever form that takes. And then we go to a place like you guys and say, okay, we're running this business as best we can. Partner with us, you take some equity, you do a bit of work on your side, we do some work on our side, and let's grow this thing. And then at some point, when you guys see like you've given all you can, at that point, that would be a venture capitalist way of exiting, or maybe you stay on for the cash flows.
Yeah, so we'll stay on. So we like to see post revenue, but it really depends on the type of company. Like, we have one biotech company where getting to post revenue is quite, it's a long road. But VCs will invest pre-revenue, but we like to do post revenue. So you want to have like a couple sales here or there. But VCs play in this whole range, right? They can go from pre-seed to seed, and these are just kind of the names of these different rounds, the different sizes of companies and where they're at in their development. We will usually stay on as an investor until maybe one or two rounds of fundraising later. So that's when we will try to exit. So maybe we'll come in at pre-seed, we'll stay on at seed, and then at Series A, somebody will then buy our shares. And that allows us then to get cash back that we can reinvest into the ecosystem and continue to invest in new companies.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, then let's maybe look at an example, because I'll give you a lot of the guys we'll chat to will be like, I've done maybe all the way up to a master's with this idea. I'm a biomed student, whatever the story is. I think it's a good idea. I think there's a market for it. I've come out, I've got an idea. Maybe I did it as my final research project, whatever it is. But I have no idea where to go from here. It's a good idea. I think it's a good product. We've made prototypes. We're happy with it. But where do I go from here? Is this the place where they start building the relationship with you? Do they stick with the university? Are there downsides to sticking with the university and sort of planting your nest there? Like, what would you give like as advice for someone like that?
It's such a great question, and it's really fun because it's one that we've played in the last 4 years. I know we were chatting previous to this, but I don't think it was in my very long introduction, but the co-founders of Holocene and I, we started at Stellenbosch University's Launch Lab. So we actually did work at the university. We worked in basically building this entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem within Stellenbosch University and the greater Stellenbosch, Cape Town, Western Cape community. And we did a lot of work with students, with grad students, with undergrads, a lot of them were, as I said, from the engineering school, which is literally right across the road, having these ideas, saying, or just being curious about entrepreneurship, or actually having something they built, having some prototypes, wanting to figure out, okay, how do I actually build a business out of that? That's what our team did, is we helped support that kind of that transfer from idea and research to a sustainable or viable business. So it's a really great question. My number one key thing to do is customer discovery. I'm sure listeners on your podcast will be familiar with this, but if you're not, it is absolutely critical that it's great that you started this idea and that you created this prototype and you think it's great and you're working on it in the lab or in the building. But what Steve Blank, who is one of our gurus, who's also an engineer turned very successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, says you have to get out of the building. You have to get out of the building, because you can build something, and this is the fatal flaw for a lot of engineers. And this is from speaking from a non-engineer, but this is what I've heard a lot about. That, and it's actually, it's not even engineers, it's everybody. You build something, and we've fallen victim to it too. You build something that you think that people want, and they don't actually want it, right? That is the worst. It's terrible, because you build this thing and you really believe in it, and then it's like, it's depressing. But there has to be this connection with the customer, and there has to be this understanding of, okay, what does the customer need and want and desire, and what are they willing to pay for, which is super critical. It's not only like, what do they want, but like, if they're not going to give you cash for it, then you don't have a business.
Exactly.
So customer discovery is super essential. And I think, we've done so much with this. So Josh and I, partner, co-founder, and I, we actually met at the design school at Stanford, because we were both so fascinated by, where's the intersection between like business and engineering and human-centered design. And I think like what I love about human-centered design is that like, and design thinking process and customer discovery, I love, and maybe this hurts a lot of other people's souls, but it makes mine really happy, is that you don't actually know the answer. Like, you literally, like, you do not know the answer.
Yeah.
You know who knows the answer? Your customers. They know the answer.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, that's freeing. I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't have to know everything. For some people, it's like, no, I know everything. Like, I know everything. And so you run into issues. But at the end of the day, again, if there's not a significantly large group of people out there with cash who's willing to give you cash because you've built something that creates value for them, that they need and they want, then it's not a business. So I think that's the number one.
Yeah. I'll just jump in here. I'll give a recent, and this is from, we work, my co-founder and I, we work to pay the bills at the moment at an established engineering company, right? And we've developed a new IoT product. And it's very different to the current business. And it's a new product launch, basically. And the whole thing this whole time has been, okay, we've done it. We've done the engineering work in the office. This thing's ready to go to market. Everything's done. We've tested it. Happy. Go ahead, guys. And we have a whole sales team, and we keep telling the sales team, go and speak to your customers about this thing. It's not perfect, but just go ask them, like, does this thing work for you? Does it solve your problem? And we get stuck at the point of the salespeople don't want to do it because they assume something about their customer. So it's okay, have you talked to the customer? Go talk to just go take a drive, go talk to the customer. And fair, we have difficult customers. I mean, it's large mining groups and things, but go talk to the guys. Does it solve their problem? At least if it solves their problem, we can come up with a price that they're willing to pay. So I think it's common, not even at I'm a university student, I made an idea, but even in established businesses, guys struggle with launching product. And again, like you say, it's about talking to the customer. We have no idea. We can think what they want. We can guess what they want. But until you talk to the guy, you have no idea.
That's exactly it. And I think, it might end up taking you guys going and talking to customers. That's so much of it. It's so much of it is just even for us, like when we're building our thesis of like what do we want to invest in, and like where should we sit in the market, and like we have an idea of where we see the gaps. We have an idea of where we think that there's an opportunity, but our customers are people who are going to invest in our fund, and so we have to make sure that it resonates with them. Because if nobody cares, then we could build whatever fund we want if nobody's going to invest in it. So it's the same thing. If you build something that nobody cares about, then it's not a business. So
I think build it and they will come. Isn't that the thing? Build it and they will come.
I know. You talk about that all the time. Field of Dreams live.
Field of Dreams all the way. All right, I think that's a good.
They'll be like, "What's Field of Dreams?" You can Google
No. I will snip in a piece of Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come. Come on.
What are you grinning at, you ghost?
If you build it, he will come.
Lies.
It's lies. So I think let's move into the common pitfalls that you guys see. Obviously, you see quite a few pitches, I would assume. I don't know if you're involved in the pitches and things. At what point do you see, obviously, customer discovery, I would assume that's why it's your number one thing. The guys haven't actually spoken to their end customer. Are there any other things, and I would assume it's engineers, because I am one. We get so stuck in our own head. There must be things we don't think about.
Don't worry, you're not the only ones.
Okay, fair enough. What are the common things you guys see, like whether it's they're not prepared enough for venture, maybe they're coming too early, too late, I don't know what it is. Are there any common pitfalls you see constantly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really understanding your market, understanding your customer is obviously very essential, right? If you're making all these hypotheses about what you think is or could be or what people want, and they haven't actually proven it. And this is also why we ask for revenue generating, post-revenue companies, is because that is a literal signal that somebody gave you money for the thing that you're building, right? It shows demand. So that I think is a big one. I do think people go to VC too early and too often. As we were talking about with these different types of capital, you really do have to figure out what your business needs and how much you need from each of these different potential funders. based off of how you're structuring your business and your business model and all of that stuff. So I think people just think, oh, VC, easy, cool, I'm just gonna go talk to them. And like, there's a trade-off, right? We take part of ownership of your company, which is I think very fair, because we're giving you capital and it could go to nothing or it could be great. But that's a risk that, people that, if you don't have the capital, you have to go out and ask for it. And so that's just kind of how it goes. And we share our carry too. So we share equity we share any gains that we make as well with our investors. So anyway, that's how it works. But yeah, kind of just looking at VC and looking at it a little bit too early when you should be really building, testing, talking to your customers, getting friends and family and generous people. That I think is an area that we see kind of pitfalls in. And I'm just trying to think of some other ones. Yeah, I think.
Well, while you're thinking, sorry, since we did chat a bit about this, have you university partnerships? Are there advantages, disadvantages? Because I've known quite a few guys scared to partner with a university because they're afraid of how much the university will take ownership of. Is that an unfounded fear? Do you know anything about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it can happen anywhere, right? If you're building a technology within an existing business, right? That's technically you're being paid by the university, you're being paid by a business to work for them. Right. So what you create within there is IP that is basically funded by that entity. So it makes sense, right? That there's equity taken and I think it really does vary by university, right? Like in terms of how they structure it and what that agreement looks like. I think the good thing is just to kind of like go in eyes wide open. If you're thinking about that route, there are many advantages of like having all these resources and being able to be funded while you're developing something. But then there is the IP and the equity and all of that. So I think the smart thing, if you can, is just to like talk to the offices there. There are a lot of like commercialization offices. Really understand what that structure looks like, and make sure that I would talk to some other folks too that are in the industry, that are outside of the university, kind of get a number of opinions and just see what makes the most sense for you. Because again, there are advantages, but then there are trade-offs, and that's just kind of how it goes. And for some, it works really well, and for some, not as much. But it really just depends on. Yeah, it just depends on. But I would get outside opinions as well. I think it's really important.
No,
to not
fair.
Just,
I think it's also important.
Yeah.
No, fair. I think it's also important. There will be at some point a piece of paper that you sign that says what you're agreeing to. So understand the piece of paper. So you can't take it's your fault at the end of the day. Okay, cool. So that's university.
But you also, it's also understanding it before you even start developing.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Because that's the really hard part. Is like it doesn't matter what agreement you're in. If you end up going down this road where you're creating something and it's not fully yours, again, whether this is in a company or a university or whatever it is. And then ex post facto, you realize, oh shoot, like I actually don't have own it. If I want to go and I want to build this into a business, I can't. So if that's even a thought, like just get familiar with what the kind of structure is and make sure that it makes sense for you.
Fair enough. Okay, that's cool. Any other the things you guys see falling prey to, or nothing at this moment?
Yeah, I think also thinking about like what people really. What ends up lacking a lot of times is that we see what we like to invest in is we like to invest in somebody who can sell, a business person, or somebody who's really good at storytelling, and then somebody who can build. So that actually like where we can, so maybe this isn't as much as falling prey as more advice, like where you can find a really good co-founder. If you are an engineer and you can find a good business salesperson, if you have an engineer who's really outgoing and able to sell, because basically for us, one, we need to make sure that you can build the product, and there's like what we call a moat, right? This kind of like protective, area between you and any other competitor. Like, so a lot of times that's the technology side, or that could be partnerships, but a lot of times it's the tech side. Is why they built something that's really cool that nobody else, or it will be very hard for somebody else to build. But then if you can't actually fundraise going forward, right? If you can't get money from people, if you can't make sales, that's critical. If you can't make sales, then again, this technology is going to go nowhere. So I think making sure that you have both those sides, the technical and technological feasibility, as well as like that ability to kind of be able to go and sell and tell the story and convince other people of what you're doing. I think those are really, if you just see one or the other, it's really hard. You kind of have to have both.
No, fair. I always tell people, like, people buy into stories. Your product can be like not the best in the market, but if you tell a really good story, you're more likely to convert, 100%. I think there was an interesting thing I saw on your guys' Instagram page. I don't know what it was. You guys were having like a little panel discussion, but it was from Johan Bersini, and he was basically saying, "Yeah, you know him, obviously. Obviously, you know him."
I was like, no,
there we go.
He's wonderful. He's one of our advisors too, so he's
that's awesome. So he was basically saying that not every business should be venture backed, right?
We deal with very early stage founders sometimes, and sometimes it's seed investment, sometimes Series A. there's a pattern recognition of the founders that we choose to back. And the big question is, why are you raising money?
So he was going into, a lot of the time they're asking the question, why are you raising money? Like, you've just come here, but why are you actually raising money? Are you building a little lifestyle business? Is this something that's going to change the world? So he was basically having that discussion. I don't know if you have anything around that. Do you ever get to the point where you're like, why actually are you here? Like, why are you raising money? It doesn't seem like you need VC funding. Is that a common discussion that you guys have?
100%, absolutely. Like, and it's interesting on the climate side too, and that's why we like have climate tech. It's like AgriFood-Tech. There needs to be this technological component that gets us to the scale where we can potentially see this 10 to 100x returns, right? And so that's why some people, and I think the solutions, like we see a lot of climate solutions that they're manufacturing businesses, right? Where like you have to you make a unit, you sell a unit, you make a unit, you sell a unit, you make a unit, you sell a unit, which is not necessarily it's not necessarily a VC, because it is more linear. It's not that like, okay, you build the software platform and wow, you get all these subscribers and all these users, and you don't really have to do that much more building in order to get that. So this like what we call the J curve, that's a VC model where you get this crazy scalability. Where it's just linear, that's not some VCs can invest in it, but for the most part, that is not going to get you the type of returns that you need in order for us to be really risky, right? And for us to bet on a bunch of companies and have some of them fail and have some of them succeed. That could be like a private equity type of thing. That could be a debt thing. Like, there are lots of other areas. And I think what you talked about and what Johan was alluding to too is, like, as you're saying, like, not only like the model and what type of business is it? Is it manufacturing? Is it tech? Is it a social good? There's this whole taxonomy of a startup that we got from Steve Blank, where it is like, okay, what type of business are you trying to build? Are you trying to build a lifestyle business where you're literally just like a surfer who, like, you want to surf, so you have a surf school, you open it for however many hours a day, and you get some cash that way, and then you live your life. That's a lifestyle business, right? You want the certain lifestyle. You have a business in order to fund it. You're not trying to scale. You're not trying to grow. You're not trying to be some mogul entrepreneur. Cool, that's fine. Then there's like SMEs, which are these smaller businesses. Maybe you bring your family into it, and you're not trying to go crazy. Maybe you have a couple outlets or whatever, but it is more funding your family and funding your life and a little bit more. You can make some good money off of it, but it's not this crazy scale, tech thing. And there's social enterprises too, right? There are some that they're not focused on maximizing profit. And so that's another totally, like, you definitely, almost definitely don't want to get a VC for that, because you're not trying to, like, we're trying to, like, we need to see profit, right? Like, it's super important for us based off of our model. So if you're a nonprofit, like, you should be getting grant funding, you should be getting funding from philanthropies, from foundations, you should not be getting funding from a venture capital firm. And so it goes back to, like, why are you trying to build this thing, and what are you trying to build? The motivation behind it, as well as, like, what's that model? And some of the models fit with venture capital, and some of them absolutely do not. And you just have to figure out what that is. Again, I have another grid for you if you wanted another graph. I'm happy to send them through.
I'm going to send you a summary email for these graphs.
Just links to all these random graphs we created. Yeah.
There we go. All right. And that graph basically shows, what does it show? Like,
so actually, it's more of a table that basically says, okay, like, if you're this type of startup, so if you are lifestyle versus nonprofit versus high growth tech versus corporate venture startup, because corporates can also have startups, like, they build their own businesses within their businesses. What does that look like? Who should you get funding from? What's the risk profile? What's the scalability of it? So you can kind of, like, look at that table and say, okay, like, if I really think about my business, where do I fit in here? And that can help you determine what type of funding you actually need.
No, that makes a lot of sense. If I hear you right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Abby, is basically funding is important, but choosing the correct funding partner is also a very important part, right? There's good VC firms and there's bad VC firms, and it's like a relationship.
I'm not gonna.
No, don't name names.
I love all of it. No, so I think actually there's 2 points. One is choose the right type of capital. So it's not just VC, right? So you have to choose the right type of capital, again, whether that's grant or debt or venture capital, equity, angel investors, whatever that is. So choose the right type of capital at the right time, and then choose the right partner. So again, like, we're fully focused on climate tech. So we have a lot of expertise to lend within the climate tech sector. We've been working on it for over 10 years in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. Climate tech is what we know. If you are a climate tech company, fantastic, come talk to us. If you're not, then we're not the right partner for you, right? If you're fintech and you have nothing to do with climate, there are lots of fintech VCs out there. But you need to make sure, if you're looking for whatever type of funder you're looking for, make sure that if you go out, like just do a little bit of research. I think that's also what we see sometimes is that, but we won't, it's easy for us to determine whether they're climate tech or not for the most part, but we'll see people just throwing us application. It's like, you didn't even look at our site because it's just, if you don't do a tiny bit of research and say, okay, what do they actually care about? What are they actually investing in? If you look on our website, you'll see it's very clear it's climate tech, right? And so if you look at Quona, it's very clear they're fintech. If you look at some of the other ones, it's very clear, like they're ed tech. So you need to make sure that one, again, you're choosing the right type of capital, the right time to get that capital within the growth of your business, and then a partner whose mandate aligns with you or who's going to fund you at that certain time.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think from just having this chat, it seems like being an entrepreneur is a very flippin' philosophical journey you have to go on. It's like a know thyself. You've got to know where your business is. Yeah, literally, like, who am I? What am I doing in this world? Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Not being pushed into a corner, going for the wrong type of capital, maybe tying yourself into bad people or people that shouldn't be in the business. Like, it seems like there's a lot of like self-growth that happens in this process.
It's 100% true. I mean, honestly, being an entrepreneur is super tough. It's super tough. And that's like one of the things for Holocene. We have 5 values, and our first one is Eyes of the Entrepreneur. We've been entrepreneurs. We have extreme amounts of empathy for them. As an entrepreneur, you have to do everything and know everything, but that's impossible, right? Like you literally, and you don't, and even if you did know everything and try to do everything, there's not enough time. So it's just like, it's really, really hard to be an entrepreneur. And so we really try and be as empathetic as possible because we've gone through it, we know it. Weirdly enough, starting your own fund, you're also an entrepreneur because we're asking people for money and we're trying to like prove our product and we're trying to build an MVP and all those different things. But it is really tough. And so I think that's when you can find mentors, especially if you can find entrepreneurs who've done it before, massive, because there's so many things and there's so many learning curves and there's so many things that you're going to need to learn, but you don't want to learn it the hard way if you can avoid it, right? By making the big mistakes. People have made these mistakes before. As much as you can find mentors that are entrepreneurs who've been through it, like the better off you're going to be because you can't learn it all, but it's going to be really painful and it's going to take a lot of time. So
No, fair enough. Yeah. No, fair enough. I think since we touched on the virtues of Holocene, obviously from your website as well, Eyes of an Entrepreneur is number 1, which you spoke about. Do you want to go through the others? I know number 2 is Candid and Connected. What exactly are you?
Thank God. I was like, oh my God, I have to remember all these. Like, yes,
No, I've got them for you.
Yeah. Candid and Connected is really about, I mean, I think our team is really cool. We have quite a varied team in terms of our interests and our personalities and all that stuff. And I think our team is actually made of just absolutely wonderful humans, which is, as the climate culture officer, I don't work in companies where I don't appreciate and enjoy the culture. That's just like my line in the sand. So we've hired amazing humans that are just wonderful people, but we all kind of like to geek out on our things and like to have our focus time and whatever. So Candid and Connected is really about, one, being, I guess, embracing this, I don't know if you guys have heard of this thing before, but embracing this theory of radical candor, where you care personally, but you challenge directly, right? So it comes from a foundation of knowing that you care about your teammates and you care about your company and you want everybody to be better and you want the company to be better and do better, right? Foundation is you care personally. But then you're challenging directly because you're not afraid to have those conversations when you see something that just isn't the way that it should be or can be improved or whatever it is. But there has to be that underlying element of caring. So we embrace radical candor. You can Google it. It's a really, really cool framework to use in terms of getting feedback and receiving feedback and asking for feedback. So radical candor is a piece of that, the candid piece. And then the connected is like, sometimes we do have to kind of get out of our little bubbles and make sure that we're making time to connect with each other. Whether that's going for a run on the mountain, which we do basically every single week, or that's just grabbing drinks together, which again, we're doing every week or so. Or just like getting a coffee or going for a walk or sending somebody a nice message, when it's an important day for them, or just, anything that we can do to make sure that we're having those touch points is really, really important. So that's that value.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's on the candor part. I think that I don't know if you've ever read Ray Dalio's Principles.
Yeah. Oh, actually,
yes,
well, I'm 30% through on my
30%.
So
it's a really good read. And I know one of the things they do at Bridgewater. Obviously, I don't know the culture there. No one quote me on this. But a lot of their thing is they have baseball cards, and they're very willing to challenge each other. I don't know exactly how it works during meetings or whatever they need to make each other better. So that just reminded me a bit of that. And the connection part is true as well. I always cringe when companies say we're a family and stuff like that. It's sort of, maybe it just rubs me the wrong way because I'm a millennial. I don't know. But I think it's important these are the people you're spending a third of your day with, at like minimum. Like at least you got to like the people and care a bit about them. So I think it's great that you guys have built such a good culture around that. I really, really enjoy it. And as Chief Culture Officer, I would assume that's your main scope.
It's important. Besides office design, it's very important. Which
There we go. But
it's part of culture. This is why I do it, though. It's
there we go.
like,
Make a nice environment.
exactly. And like for us, for our office, like we have like pictures of ourselves in beautiful places. Like we want to be inspired. We have like natural things everywhere. We have like just because like we want it to be enveloped in the culture, so you can touch it and you can see it and you can interact with it. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
It is part of this. Yeah, it's part of the job, I guess.
No plastic plants laying around.
No.
Just checking. I don't know. Cost cutting. You never know.
I've done it before, but no, not in our office. It's all actually indigenous. Duval, our third co-founder, his request was indigenous plants, and I was like, I love that, so that's what we got.
Go for it. Fair enough. The third one is the art of backpacking. I'm interested in this one. What exactly is that?
So it came from this quote. So we basically when we do our values, and this is what I do for a lot of our companies, almost all of our portfolio companies, I help them to develop their mission, vision, and values, and then their culture around it. But we kind of we came up with like the ideas that are really important to us and the principles that are really important to us, and then we kind of put together these the titles of them so that they're sticky, that they're interesting, that they're kind of like, they make you be like, what does that mean, right? The art of backpacking, what does that mean? It comes from a quote, so it's like basically taking the ideas that we believe in. It comes from this quote that's called that is, the art of backpacking is knowing what not to bring.
Sure.
So it's about it's right. It's cool, right? It's like stripping things down and being like, okay, for our entrepreneurs, we don't want to overload them. What's the most essential thing that we can tell them right now, right? What is the most practical tip that we can give them? How can we give them things that they can use immediately? And then also like, how do you just take the first step? We're very action oriented. So when you're on, you got your backpack on, you're going to go up the mountain, like just keep taking one step after the next, and don't like spend so much time overthinking everything that you get stuck in analysis paralysis. Go, take the first step. Have a bias towards action. And then I think for us too, it's like, we're a young firm. We are trying to make sure that we can maximize the capital that we have as much as possible. So it is about being, just really thinking about like, how do we use our resources as, efficiently as we possibly can, so that we can also give as much value as we can to our entrepreneurs.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's a beautiful quote. I flipping love that. That's awesome.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, it's great because it makes you think. Like, it's not like I hate companies' mission and vision statements. They're all the same thing from ChatGPT. We want to be the best manufacturing distributor in the Southern African region. Oh, no. That's awesome. I love that one. That's awesome. Number 4, front of the wave. Give me that one.
Yeah. So if you can tell, they're all like outdoorsy, which again ties into our brand and ties into like our mission and vision. And I totally agree with you. This is again the work that I do, is like I make sure that people's values aren't integrity and openness. Like that kills me.
Love it.
And they
I
just
love
have
it.
it slapped on the wall, like if your value isn't integrity, we got something. We got bigger issues. But anyway. So the one that we were on, what was it again?
Front of the wave.
Okay, yes. So yes, all outdoorsy kind of vibes there. But this one is about being front of the wave. For us is being like at the cutting edge, right? It's like basically like kind of leading the pack, if you will. So, we're doing things not in the way that it necessarily has been done by every single other VC or entrepreneurial ecosystem builder or whatever it is. We do things the way that we think makes sense. So, for example, we actually called our diligence process. So diligence is when venture capital firms, or really any investor, goes and does a bunch of research on you and gets documents from you and really tries to understand your business and whether this is a good investment for them. We try and make our diligence process interactive, and we're actually working with our entrepreneurs, and we're actually providing value for them, because we know that diligence stinks. It's really tough, and it takes a lot of your time as an entrepreneur. So how do we actually not only take time, but also provide value? So just because everybody else does it one way doesn't mean that we have to do it that way. We just kind of think about things a little bit differently, and how would we want it to be done, and how do we think it's going to be done to be most effective? And we really want to set the bar for everybody else. So if we're seeing that the rest of the industry, takes this long to do something, why can't we do it in a shorter amount of time, right? If we think it makes sense for us. So we're trying to really set a new bar where we think it's appropriate and where we think it makes sense.
No, makes sense. Okay, that's awesome. And then number 5 is life lived wild. That sounds interesting. Yeah. That's
sometimes when you just, you need to
let your
head
hair
out
down
at 2 p.m. on a Friday and go climb a mountain. You just got to do it.
Got to do it. Yeah. Do you guys have enough mountains down there?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
This is why we live in Stellenbosch. It's so,
no, fair enough.
It's so epic, right? It's just, it's it is actually, for us, it's about really living our values outside of work and within our team. So when we go and do offsites or we do an end of the year celebration, we're not just all at a bar getting drinks, right? We're out we're at somewhere beautiful and we're biking and we're hiking and we're running and we're swimming and we're doing whatever, and we're really getting out into nature. And this is like the events that we've done in like the last year. We do these like green strides where we bring anybody in the climate industry together, and instead of just sitting and talking or just talking to or at people, we literally get people out for a run and a hike, and then we talk, and then we have a beer and whatever it is. So it's about like making sure that we are staying connected to the wild places that inspire us, and also bringing other people out into those places, because we do really think, one, it makes us more balanced, and the more important thing is that it helps people to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and it helps them hopefully to become more connected to nature and want to preserve it in the way that we do. So that's really like, we're just basically tying as much of the community and much to ourselves to the mission and to the bigger thing, which is nature and which is the environment, which is the planets, in as many ways and as often as we can.
No, so I was just saying, Abby, this isn't just lip service. Whenever you look at your guys' social media or anything, it's about you guys are in the veld somewhere climbing something, or some mountain somewhere is being conquered by you guys. And it's really awesome because, as you say, it like brings you back to, this is what these guys are about. They are here to save that thing because they enjoy it so much, because it means so much to them. And I think that's really awesome. It's a fresh change from the general thing we constantly see of people. So yeah, I think Holocene's doing awesome stuff. I think if you have an idea of it, you guys say you've been around for about 10 years.
We've been working in climate tech in Africa for 10 years. We've been together as a founding team. We've been together for the last 4 years, and then started Holocene just over a year ago.
Okay, that's awesome. So where does Holocene go from here? I don't know where you guys currently are, and what's the future look like for you guys? Where are you guys going with this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I really feel like there's so much, we're at such a nascent stage in the climate tech ecosystem, especially in Southern Africa, that I think there's just a lot of room to grow. So right now we have, our current fund that we're raising for, and that's going to be a $3 to $5 million fund. In the next couple of years, by 2026, we hope to raise $30 million so we can invest more into the ecosystem. I think that there's going to be a much stronger ecosystem here in terms of like just climate tech events and people who are interested in the sector and are excited about it. I want more funding to come down from Europe and from other parts of Africa. And hopefully we're trying to get the United States to fund more of the projects that we have here too. And then, I think we want to participate in Pan-African climate tech startups, but I could see us potentially like going global south, right? Like potentially investing in South America, potentially investing in Asia. But like right now, like our passion is for Africa. And we want to really see this ecosystem grow. We want to see exits. We want to see, entrepreneurs build really exciting businesses and have them really scale. So for now, for the foreseeable future, we're focused on just building out this ecosystem and trying to get more funding and to get more entrepreneurs and to get more startups in this space.
Doing some customer discovery, I see. Looks that way.
Always discovering.
Always. I think, Abby, this is a question I ask quite a few of the guests, but Africa specifically, very weird set of circumstances we're in. I think there's lots of space to grow and stuff. I take sort of a Vusi Tembakwayo view of we should be a borderless continent, something like the States. I think there's a lot of rules and policies in place that delay innovation, let's call it. Africa, if you had to look at it, what do you think if you could give a policymaker one piece of advice? What are you giving them for Africa specific? It can be South Africa specific if you want, or you can go full Africa. What would you say?
That is a really
big
tough
question.
One. That is a really tough one.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. It's funny. I'm a political science major, and I went totally away from that.
Well, let's see if we can probe your brain a bit. Oh goodness.
I think I would say the biggest area that I see as being an inhibitor to innovation are IP laws, and just. I know sometimes it feels like, okay, you want to protect what you have within your borders, but I also think that ends up not allowing for scale and for the ability to create kind of these innovations that have a much bigger impact and can be a lot bigger. It almost constricts growth sometimes. So I think that that one would be an area that I think is important to look at, is just how are you structuring your IP laws? How are you making it easier for startups to come into the ecosystem? How are you making sure that, good talent is able to build what they want to build and be able to scale it? I think that's very general, but
no. That's fair. Abby, I think let's do a final one. If you can just give me like a recommendation for what you believe, like I don't know, you said you had a book or something like that you think everyone should read, and then we can tap off from there.
Okay, yes. I'm going to go back to the agri-food-tech sector. And it will not necessarily make you turn into a vegetarian, but I think that it was it helped, it got me on the path. I think it's more interesting.
Yeah.
But I would say there's this book called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. I read it, I think when I was in college, and it literally it changed my whole concept. And it's based off of the US food system, but it's super interesting in terms of how does food get to you? How is it made? Is it food? It's really well written too. And I would also then, if you're not a reader and if you're more of a watcher, I would watch Forks Over Knives. That's on, I think it's on Netflix. It's based off of the China study. Don't read the China study, it's too long. I loved it, but if you're not passionate about it, just let that one be. But Forks Over Knives is a great documentary that's really all about the China study. It's crazy, the influence your food and your lifestyle has on your longevity. It's just the coolest little experiment that has been, big experiment that was done in China to understand what are the connections between what you eat and how long you live
and longevity.
And
oh, I love that type of thing, so I'll definitely be watching that. Awesome. Okay, sweet. Abby, thank you so much.
The hack there is just vegetables.
Yeah. Full circle. I love that. Abby, thank you again. Abby from Holocene, thank you so much for joining me, for giving me your precious time up for me. I really appreciate it. There was a bit of back and forth, so everyone knows. This was quite an interesting interview to set up. I know Abby's been redecorating, rebuilding, re-infrastructuring Holocene all by herself, it seems like. So we'll be adding that to the CV. Thank you so much, honestly, for your time. It's been really awesome, guys. As always, I will leave all the links and graphs that Abby's going to send me. I will leave down links in the show notes for you guys. Take a peruse in your own time. Really, thank you so much again, Abby. It's been an honor. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, guys, if you guys want to subscribe, please hit subscribe for us. It really, really helps out the channel. We love you guys. If you want to reach out to us, it's highlevelpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send any questions you'd like me to forward on to Abby, maybe we can do a follow-up with just questions or whatever it is. We'll have to have Josh on. I mean, honestly, I need to hear this whaling story.
Got another whaling story.
Have to. Have to. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. That was us, Abby from Holocene on the High Level Podcast. We'll just see you in the next one.